crypto crisis and what's behind the increasing levels of Cryptosporidium. We come at it from a slightly different perspective. We are a chemical company. We manufacture disinfectants and dairy hygiene. So we want to sort of look at maybe some of the hygiene points to consider, and hopefully some tips that you might find useful. It's just a bit of background on scours and crypto itself. So the sort of well-known figure out there is over 80% of UK cattle farms have experienced scour on their units at some point. So that's 4 out of 5 farms that have experienced scour, and then 50% have experienced calf mortality. So they've actually had animals die due to scour. So it really is a massive problem, and it's widely prevalent across the industry. If we break those causes of scour down, and firstly, thanks to MSD for sharing some data and some information on the prevalence of the disease. As you can see, over 30% of scours is caused by crypto, followed by 24% rotavirus, and then going down with cocci, salmonella, coronavirus, and E. coli as well. Just wanted to draw your attention to a calf side test. We manufacture one. I know there's others on the market as well, but quite how important these can be. Actually diagnosing or knowing your enemy, knowing what pathogen you're up against, from a calf side test that can get you a result pretty quickly. So what is Cryptosporidium parvum? So that's the most common cause of calf scour. Most people know it as crypto. It's mostly seen in calves 1 to 2 weeks old. That doesn't mean that it can't strike at any other time. It causes an intermittent scour that can contain blood. It can contain mucus. The calves don't want to eat. They're dehydrated. They're weak and lethargic, and they have that that sort of horrible hunched up look to them when they're in pain, and they can have a temperature as well. So it's a horrible disease, and it's something that in the right environment will spread. So from our perspective, then when we go out on farm looking at it, we want to ascertain where is that disease pressure coming from. How did that pathogen get onto the unit, and how is it being transmitted? So it can come through on your boots or your clothing. You can get transmission from other stock that's on the farm. It can be in the housing, on the hutches, the walls, the hurdles, through the bedding. You don't know what vermin are running around. How clean are the feeding utensils? Are you using the same feeders from pen to pen, or are they being used on individual pens, disinfected and cleaned before being used again? What vehicles are going through? Are they going from shed to shed, or even farm to farm? And the same with visitors, whether it's people like myself and reps, vets, or even staff that you have that might work on other units as well. So there's a whole multitude of places that these disease pressures can come from. And to get on top of these, and to hopefully rule out some of these areas of transmission, we generalize the whole category under biosecurity. Biosecurity is a bit of a buzzword in the industry, really. But in an actual definition of biosecurity is measures taken to reduce the risk and spread of disease. So that's what we want to do. We want to lower the risk of disease coming onto farm. If it's on farm, we want to reduce the risk of it spreading. Biosecurity is used, on farms, regionally, globally. Over the last few years with pandemics, it's really become a, a massive important part of any operation. So to implement it, you assess the risk and then implement measures that will decrease that risk. Implementation of biosecurity, as I was saying, it's not a new topic, but it's one that's massively integral to maintaining the welfare and the performance of your herds. Farmers are under pressure to reduce disease on farm, to in turn reduce antibiotic use. We want to improve animal welfare, and also comply to any audit standards that you need to. But I think something really key is how much of a drain on your farm resource that a disease outbreak is. Not just the money, in treating something, but those animals are going to take a long time if they ever come back to where they need to be. And also the resource that it takes with staffing, and it's demoralizing to come back and see sick animals. So, we want to tackle the disease outbreak before it gets too bad. And as you can see from the basic triangle on the right there, if the higher focus there is on biosecurity, the less likely there is for disease to get onto farm, which in turn makes that actual disease red triangle smaller. Just as a bit of information, we ran a survey, the Progiene Biosecurity Survey, and that was interesting. That was a figure of nearly 80% of dairy farms that said they've had disease pressure in the last 2 years that required them to increase their biosecurity practices to control. Now, the main disease incidences that the farmers in the survey that we did, the disease pressures that they were coming under, they related more to TB, Johne's, E. coli, and Salmonella as well. So you add those into the other diseases that we saw in the earlier slides. There's pressure from various pathogens across a unit. And just out of interest, we looked at the British Dairy and Young Stock supplement. 30% of those articles in there highlighted the importance of biosecurity to reduce disease pressure on farm. And there were some really, really good case studies and results from that. One farm reducing calf mortality from 4.6 to 1.8% by turning that calf unit into a biosecure area. So they were looking at changes of clothes, changes of boots, and actually the way that they handled the calves as well. So you're looking at more your sort of pig and poultry unit levels of biosecurity. And I think one of the key takeaways for me was that the farms that have the greatest success with their biosecurity measures are ones that use easy to understand operating procedures, and they'll write things down. They know where they are, they know what chemical's been used, and they know for how long, and all the staff will comply with that. So if we look at our farm, and where we need the various points of disinfection, where pathogens can come into the farm, you've got the obvious one, which is the entranceway. So your lane or farm gates, vehicles coming in and out of there. Wanting to know where those vehicles have been, if they're delivery vehicles that have been on 5 or 6 other units that day. Is it your own vehicles? Then we move across to the housing. In what proximity do you keep your calves to your older stock? And every farm's different, and every farm has their challenges, especially with livestock housing and where to put animals sometimes. But trying to consider, keeping stock apart as as well as you can. Farm vehicles moving from shed to shed, or from even farm to farm if it's contractors. Vermin potential in your feed storage areas, and then your cow accommodation and your milking parlour. You've got groups of animals gathering, different people coming in and out. So there's a lot of different points of potential disinfection points or potential pathogen transmission areas. One of the ones we just wanted to mention here was the boot dips. A really common sight across farms all over the country. Not necessarily always the orange boot dipper there. It could be a old mineral bucket or a cut off 200-litre barrel. They come in all shapes and sizes. But the key is that if they are there, that they're used. It's all well and good having something to comply to a standard, but we really need these things to be used. That was moving on to another point of the biosecurity survey that we did. This was about boot dipping. 80% of farms have one. 55% of dairy farms didn't require every visitor to use it. So over half of the farms that had a boot dip there said that they didn't make everybody use it when they came onto farm. And of that, 62% only change it after more than 15 uses. We say for a boot dip, once it's had 15 people through it, then it's time to change the chemical in there. So there's some really interesting points that came up there. If we take the conversation back to cows, back to what the talk is about, and if we look at our farm, first thing we want to do when we're looking at your calves' environment, we need to take a step back and actually evaluate that environment that those calves are coming into. So as you know, calves they're born with no natural immunity. They're reliant on passive or maternal transfer from the colostrum. So we need to, rather than starting at the calf housing, actually take it back one step and look at the calving pen. Look at where that calf is going to drop, and try and start the protocols from there, and then from there on follow that calf all the way through, through their movements, and see where the risk areas are and where the potential for transmission and for them to pick up pathogens is. And then from that, come up with a specific protocol for your farm. Ensure it's understood and easy to understand and easy to be adhered to by all the staff. So if it's just somebody that comes in on a weekend, make sure that they follow the same procedures as everybody that's there full time. So if we're looking at the calf pen, or the calving pen, sorry, we want to evaluate how clean that pen is where the calf will drop. What's the protocol for when that pen is empty, and how often is that pen used? Have you got the option for rotating calving pens, or do you have to have a quick clean down before the next cow goes in? And just try and look at and evaluate what that calf's first encounter of the surface might be. Is it a mat? Is it concrete? Is it straw? What the bedding is, what the temperature is in there, and also the moisture content. Is that calf going to drop into a windy, cold environment? We've got some images here of sort of nearly an idyllic situation. Individual calving pens that are cleaned and disinfected between uses. So the calves dropped. it's healthy, it's all fine. Everything's going well, and then we look at moving the calf. So that calf, then we've got a couple of things to consider when we're moving the calf. Firstly, how is it being done? Are you walking the calf through? Are you putting them in a box, like the one on the top left there, the steel one that's can take a couple of calves on the front of a loader. Really easy to clean. Really easy to disinfect and keep clean. Something like the milk taxi underneath there, again, made of surfaces that are easy to clean, disinfect before moving the next calf. And, when we're looking at those, then try and look at what the distance is from the calving pen to the calf house. With that, I mean, what route is taken? Is it the shortest distance you take? Do you go through buildings with other stock in, or do you take the path of least pathogen risk? So round some sheds, down a track somewhere, where they're not going to come into contact with other stock. This calf with a naive immune system. We want to keep it away from other pathogens if we can. So we put our calf in the calf pens. The protocols when the calf is in there, I think, are really key. The use of whiteboards. We see a lot more of them on farm now, which is great. Any staff member coming in knows exactly what calves where, potentially what treatments they've had if they've needed it, or why they've been separated. Keeping all the information there and keeping it updated is really key. But also having some written protocols, especially for things like scour, pneumonia, things like that. Having some written protocols for your staff so that they know what to do, when to do it. But also, I think a key thing there is also when to seek help. When do they need to take it to the next stage and get in contact with the vet. I think it's really key that all staff are following and adhering to the same protocols. So calf housing, there's a wide variety out there. You've got your permanent sheds like the ones in the photos here. You've got your movable hutches, your igloos. I think one of the things that was really apparent with the unit here is the consideration of the surfaces. So those two pictures there, they're actually of the same calving pen, same calf pen. And as you can see, they've got the steelwork on the side, concrete floor with drainage channels, but the attention to detail for the disinfection and the cleaning protocol is really outstanding. Making sure that pen is completely free of any organic matter, cleaned out, disinfected, and dry before restocking. But we know that's not always, it's not always easy to have a setup like that on farm. And the point of this whole webinar is it's not about getting people to change their whole housing system. It's to look at potentially ways of decreasing a risk. We got the image on the top right there. Calves look happy, calves look fine, and they're bedded up well. From our perspective, you'd potentially come across issues with the corrugated, where it's rusting, where it might have some holes in there, and the timber clad in there. Behind that, in between the corrugated, it's an easy place for pathogens to hide and grow. And when you're disinfecting and cleaning, these sort of spots are easier to miss. So things like parlour board, stock board, cladding, things like that, which can be cleaned and dry quickly as well, are really good materials. So there's just a huge variety of options out there. You get down to the bottom left there with a nice igloo, the stock board. Those things are a lot more maneuverable and easier to get in and out of to clean. And then the last thing with protocols for your calf pens, the feeding equipment. We see this sometimes being neglected and being forgotten slightly. I think any item that is used to either mix, transport, or feed a calf needs to be cleaned and disinfected between feedings. I'm trying to say to people, think of your milk prep kitchen and feeding your calves. Think of them needing a food hygiene source. The green box there, the Food Standards Agency one that you see on every restaurant and takeaway. If you were to give your farmer a food hygiene score, honestly, what would it be? And I think that's quite a good place to start, and look at areas then that you can potentially raise that score. So we've gone through. We've got our cabin pen all nice and clean. The calf housing's nice and clean. We've got all those ready. We now move on to our disinfectant choice. Which disinfectant do we use? There's loads on the market, but we want to sort of break it down, make it easier to see. So the things we really need to consider are: what do we want it to do? Where do we want to use it? How do we want to use it? And any other points following on from that. So do we want it to do crypto and cocci, or do we just want something that's going to cover TB and the other viruses, such as there's rotavirus and coronavirus, or a general order, salmonella, E. coli, and foot and mouth comes under that as well. And then where do we want it to use it? Is it for your calving pen? Is it for a vehicle? Is it going to boot dip? Or is it for your feeding equipment? How do you want to use it? Knapsacks, boot dips, wheel wash. These are all considerations. And then on the bottom row there, the other points to consider, the product presentation. Is it a powder or is it a liquid? Is it easy to mix? Does it leave a residue there? Is it something that needs to be rinsed off? And I think really important for dairy farms, you're making sure that it's quat free. We obviously don't want any quats on dairy units. So where do we go to find this information? The DEFRA approved list of disinfectants is a really comprehensive list that's got everything on it. The products that are on there are all the DEFRA approved. There's products on there. It's really good to keep an eye on that. There'll be sometimes products suspended, some products removed. So making sure that the disinfectant that you're using on your unit is still one that's on the DEFRA approved list is vital. The numbers that they show on that list are the quantities of water per 1 part product. But we'll show some examples in a moment. The DEFRA list condenses these products into 5 specific disease orders. So you have your diseases of poultry, the diseases of swine, foot and mouth disease, tuberculosis, and a general order, such as salmonella and E. coli. So this is an example of how they'd look on the DEFRA website. I've put Coxicure there. That's one of ours where we can talk about that one. If we go along there, so we can see the chemical group is a phenol chemical. Foot and mouth disease order. That product is 1,000 to 1. So it's 1,000 parts water to 1 part product. So 10 ml in 10 litres of water. We move across 50 parts water to 1 for the swine, 125 for poultry, 15 for TB, and 50 for general order. I've put couple of examples below that. So one thing, just looking at the chemical name there, sodium dichlorothiazide, that would be a no-no for dairy farms. That would generate cyanuric acid. So that obviously we don't want used on farm. And as you can see there, their dilutions are 299, so it's slightly more challenging to work out how much to put in a knapsack sprayer, for example. And then the bottom one there, quaternary ammonium compounds, that's your quats. So you don't want anything that has those, you don't want on farm. And that's a good example there of where something isn't approved for that order. And you can see from the bottom right, the last column there, where it says approval suspended. So that's up to DEFRA when they do that. So it's always good to keep an eye on and make sure what you are using is fully covered. If you look at a label, this is an example of what we have to write on it. We do the nice label at the front with the picture on it. The one on the back is what we have to put on these products legally. Zoomed in there, so we have to put on there the 1 part per however many parts water, and the links to the DEFRA site there. On the front label, we've tried to make it slightly easier to understand. So, for example, the dilution rate, general disinfection, 1 to 100, 1 litre of Coxicure to 100 litres of water. And the same, we've been through that with others as well. It's not always the easiest thing to work out, though, if you've got a 15 or 20 litre knapsack sprayer. So what we've done, what I just wanted to show you quickly, is something that we've put on the Progiene website. We've made a disinfectant calculator just to try and make it a little bit more straightforward and easier to understand. So, for example, for this, we can put in 15 litres of water for a knapsack sprayer. On the drop-down list there, what disease we want it to cover. So if we go down to covering Coxy and Crypto at the bottom there. And if we click on Coxicure, it would tell us that we need 450 mils or 0.45 litres for 15 litres of water. So it's a little bit easier than trying to work out the parts per when you're by the hose pipe. The same, we just change the volume and it will change the usage. So it's hopefully a useful tool that we've got on there that will make life slightly easier and make sure that everybody's using the right dilution rate of product. So when we come to actually cleaning out the shed or the pens, we need to come up with our cleaning protocols. So first things first, knowing your pathogen, what you're up against, what you're trying to kill, make sure you're using the right product. Try to work with the materials, like we were saying, that are less likely to form biofilms and harbour bugs, things like the stainless steel, the plastics. Then we want to remove all the bedding, all the organic matter, rinse off any manure and apply detergent, a foam, ideally. If you need to get rid of some biofilm, which is bacteria that's becoming trapped in slime, using a brush or a sponge, there is occasionally some elbow grease needed, but it's really important to get rid of those biofilms. Rinse off that detergent and then apply the correct choice of disinfectant at the right dilution rate for the right length of time. Leave that to air dry. And then the last point there, I know, which is something that comes up, especially with units that are under time pressure to get restocked, but taking the time to actually review the results. I don't know if it's just me or you guys as well, but if you clean your car on a wet day, you know, it looks absolutely sparkling out there, and then, you know, a couple of hours later when it's all dried off, you look out and you think, oh, I've missed that bit. And it's the same thing. So, you know, leave it to air dry and then just review the results. If you need to go over an area again, you know, it is worth that time. And then in summary, at the end here, you know, just want to say a focus on biosecurity really does pay off on farm. You know, it goes hand in hand with everything, you know, that you're trying to do with, you know, other people, with your vets, with your other consultants and advisors. You know, but a focus on it really does help. You know, think about taking a step back and thinking about reducing the risk of that disease coming in, and then, you know, focusing on how these pathogens can spread within the farm. And I think just thinking about what few practical, simple steps you can take to control the disease spread on your unit.